Hi there and welcome to Central Texas Gardener. I'm Tom Spencer. Many of us are looking for easy care solutions to fill shade under trees or to replace lawns and hot sunny strips. Today, Sharon Truett from The Natural Gardener has the answer with some new ideas for ground covers. On tour, let's visit a garden and a friendship that's evolved over time.
Like all gardens, this one has seen a few changes since its conception in 1984. Through its evolution, owner Sherry Smith and designer Susan Lane found a kinship to share their families, life's evolutions, and their dreams for the garden.
I was very blessed to meet Susan Lane 25 years ago, and she installed this garden, and Susan is quite an artist.
Susan is also far-sighted, so her first move was to define long-term structure.
We planted trees to, it's a two-story house, and so we needed some height there in the front. And we planted native trees, mountain laurel, yaupon, crepe myrtles, not native but very good and regionally for this area. And set them in such a way to frame up but not hide the house.
Next, with the English Tudor house in mind, Susan threaded dimension and discovery through architect Tom Scheffelman's design for the front walkways and porch. Perspectives and color influenced the garden and the friendship between Sherry, a teacher of art history, and Susan, garden designer.
I personally love jewel tones. I love medieval art and illuminated manuscripts and stained glass windows. And so I wanted as many of those colors in the garden as I could get. I told Susan in the beginning that I did not like yellow. And Susan gently nudged me in the direction of yellow because she said, that's a contrast to all the rich, deep colors you like. And of course, I've learned that she's exactly right, and you'll see yellow all the time in my garden. And in stained glass, you see the yellows next to the blues, and they enrich each other. They magnify each other. And I think that's what Susan accomplishes in the garden. And yet, in the summer, there's a light touch with whites and baby blues, and so the garden changes throughout the year.
Over the years, Susan moved to perennials for progressive but easy care interest instead of the annuals that populated the garden in the beginning. She still peppers in a few for seasonal emphasis and to fill spaces when perennials go dormant in winter.
Gradually it got just like any gardener wants to have something that works for their area and that they don't have to keep replacing. So we got into a great palette of plants that were able to stay there and come back year after year. Like in the backyard here, it's green, there's textures, we have some color, but we don't bring in color that's not going to work just for the season.
Instead, in the shady backyard, Susan goes for low-maintenance dramatic form and mostly evergreen diversity in texture. For accent color on the patio, she fills Sherry's collection of containers that depict her love of 12th century Romanesque sculpture.
One of my interests that influenced me in the garden is my love for medieval art. What I love about medieval art is iconography and all the details that you find in the art. I found a pot from Portugal that is carved with a wonderful medieval hunt scene that you see in a lot of illuminated manuscripts and especially on medieval tapestries. I love to study each detail, and I feel the same way when I go into my garden and I look at each plant and appreciate each little detail of that plant.
Another symbol of Sherry's journey into the art world, begun with her parents, is an Eiffel Tower, a gift from a friend.
I think of it as a tower of strength.
Like life itself, the garden's strength comes from essential roots that support growth and change.
Over this 25-year period, the garden has become much richer and more varied.
The experience of taking care of this garden for 25 years, creating it and then taking care of it for 25 years has been incredible. In fact, I don't have to take care of my yard. My yard, it doesn't matter what it looks like because I have this one to be creative in. And to have someone like Sherry, a client who allows you to do this in their yard and is so supportive of you and lets you, you know, just anything you can bring to it is gung-ho about it and very happy to have it happen. It's been quite a treat.
Every time I drive in the driveway, I stop and look at the garden and feel so blessed that I have it. I think of my garden as a gift to the neighborhood. I'm so happy when I see them stop at my garden. And I encourage them to walk up to the front porch and walk around the sidewalk and really look at the plants, because I do it for the Austin community as much as myself. And Susan will tell you I rarely pick flowers because I want them to be out there in all their glory.
Thanks for opening your garden up to us again, Sherry. It was great to see it. And thanks for being a friend of Central Texas Gardener. Right now we're going to turn to another friend of the program, Sharon Truett from the Natural Gardener, and it's always a pleasure to have you join us.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Well, you are going to have a tough assignment today. We're going to be talking about two of the growing conditions that are hardest for Central Texas gardeners: full blasted heat and dark shade.
Yes.
These tough things to deal with.
The dark shade's the tougher of the two. There's lots of plants that like the full blasting sun.
That's true. That's true. And we have a variety of things for ground covers in these different circumstances. And these are really cool alternatives to boring old grass.
I think so, yeah.
Well, we're going to start with some new, speaking of grass, we're going to start with some new turfs that really look exciting to me. Now, the first one is called Tech Turf.
Right, yeah.
And this is a buffalo, right?
It's a buffalo hybrid. Mm-hmm. I don't know what it was hybridized with, but it's a buffalo hybrid. That's what Turffalo will tell you. Okay,
now I understand this is improved in many ways in terms of its aggressiveness over the other buffaloes.
Right. It won't let nearly as much weed aggression into it. It fills out very quickly. It's very thick. We have some growing at the Natural Gardener around our water, you know, our big water feature. And I just love to take my shoes off and walk barefoot in it. It's soft, thin blade, and it needs very little water. Very little water.
And it's one of those grasses that looks great unmowed.
Yes, I prefer it unmowed. We've done both. It only gets about, 6 to 8 inches high when you don't mow it, and it will seed, and the seed on top is gold and beautiful. Or you can mow it, and it looks like a turf grass. It looks just like a turf grass.
And I understand it spreads aggressively, but it's easy to control.
Yeah, because it spreads on top of the soil, not underneath like Bermuda. So when you don't want it going into your garden, you just take your weed whacker and around the edge, and there you go.
Perfect. Yeah. Well, again, it's called Tech Turf and available in plugs. And I understand you can plant it even as maybe on 2-foot centers, and it'll aggressively fill in.
Yeah, I mean, it'll take a little longer, but it's a pricey grass. So if you want to make your money go further, just spread it a little wider.
Okay. Right next to it, we have another grass that is for the opposite situation. This is called Shadow Turf.
Shadow turf, right.
And this is a zoysia hybrid.
Correct. And they say that it can take up to 80% shade, which out of 10 hours, that's just 2 hours of sun. That's a lot of shade for a grass.
Right.
And it's supposed to also get very thick, very turf-like. You can walk in it. It's very nice.
It's a very attractive grass from here. I mean, for people who like that putting green look in a lawn, that's pretty darn close.
Exactly. And it's also, even though it's a zoysia hybrid, very drought tolerant.
That's good news.
Yeah. 1 inch a week is what they say. That's all you need.
Well, that's about twice our annual rainfall, but it's better than St. Augustine.
Right. Yes.
Not too bad. Not too bad. But again, very attractive grass alternatives for those difficult places.
Right.
Now, again, because our focus is on ground covers and doing some unusual things, you've brought groups of plants with you today, including a batch of different herbs. And I think this is a fun idea for ground cover.
Yeah, I just want people to think about other things than Asian jasmine, vinca, those things that just spread in that traditional way.
Right.
And herbs are a wonderful thing to put in that really hard, hot strip between the sidewalk and the street. And you can use them for cooking. And I brought oregano, 3 different types of oregano. Oh, goodness, there's so many different varieties, but I wanted to show a difference. And then there's thyme, which is also just very drought tolerant, loves the sun, and you can use it for cooking, and it's very beautiful.
And you don't have, when you say ground cover, it doesn't have to mean you have a solid planting of the same exact plant.
Absolutely not.
You can use groups of different things, different forms of the same plant.
Yeah.
And that's a good illustration of that right there. And here you have edible ground cover. So
I know, how wonderful.
Yeah.
And fragrant too.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you actually do walk on it, you get the fragrance kind of wafting up as you walk on it. Right next to it, one of my favorite plants in my garden.
Mine too.
Blackfoot daisy, and I use it in my gravel garden.
Yes.
And it's quite literally weed-like there. I mean, don't have to do a thing about it. Just kind of happy as it can be, blooming probably 10 months out of the year.
Right. Water, no water, it doesn't matter. And you said gravel garden, which is really neat because it loves to be top dressed with maybe decomposed granite, which is very attractive. And you could pair that up with 4-nerve daisy, which likes the exact growing conditions and have yellow and white.
Yeah, that's the pairing that I use in my garden. This with a 4-nerve daisy.
And it'll bloom all winter.
All winter long. Actually, yeah, it's pretty much a year-round plant.
Exactly. Yeah.
A little aggressive. A little. That's okay though.
When it's happy.
When
it's okay.
happy,
We
that's
can
right.
forgive it.
Now you brought another grouping with you, and this is I love this little pairing here, and these are different ice plants.
Right. Yeah. I think people are becoming more familiar with ice plants, and again, there are so many different kinds, so many different genus species of them.
And some of them are really aggressive.
And in some other states, they're very aggressive, more so than here in Texas.
Right.
But I wanted to show that there are tall varieties, medium, and then really low growing. They all bloom profusely, not so much in the hottest part of the summer, but all spring and in the fall again. But in the summer, it's a lovely green, matte look.
Right.
It's very lovely.
Okay, well, again, that's a plant family for people to look into.
Right.
The ice plants. Now, the Tradescantias this is a huge, diverse plant family.
Oh, it is.
And all different kinds of plants in it. You know, the wandering Jew, the little purple variety that a lot of people, that's the common name that so many people know it by. I love the color on this one. This is a new form, right?
Right, and it's also, well, I'm not sure if it's how new it is, but it's not seen very often. And it's got a fuzzy covering too that I don't know if you can see from the cameras, but it's beautiful.
Well, I think, yeah. And it's called Purple Haze, Mexican Spiderwort.
Purple haze, yes.
Well,
it's beautiful. I love it. And I don't have this variety in my garden at home, but I have the purple, and it blooms full shade, and bees love it. So it's a great way to attract pollinators to your yard. It's wonderful.
It's just a great plant family. Lots of different ones in it.
And drought tolerant as all get out.
Great choice. Now, salvias are another good choice, and you brought the little cedar sage, and you wanted to show it kind of paired up here, so I'm going to do that for you so people can see how attractive this would be when it's planted in a mass planting.
Right, and for that bright shade, I wouldn't plant this in the deepest, darkest shade, but for the dappled shade, the morning sun shade, you can buy these in little 4-inch plants, so you can plant them all through an area. And it's getting ready to bloom. I wish it was blooming. It's still growing.
Pretty red flower.
Beautiful, striking red flowers. And it will reseed quite aggressively. And you can literally have just a meadow of cedar sage. And it's beautiful.
I know people actually mow this.
You can mow it. And it never totally disappears, even in the winter.
Right.
So it's another good ground cover.
Right. Well, it's a really terrific plant. Now I'm going to skip one because we're running a little low on time, and I want to highlight some of these things where the colors are really punched out.
Sure.
And we have 2 different varieties of Salvia coccinea here, and I think this is just the standard form, right?
Yep.
The red.
The red.
Also,
that's called coral.
And they're called the tropical sages as one common name. And here's coral nymph, right?
Right, coral nymph.
And I tell you, folks, these are aggressive. They will seed out.
But isn't that what you want in
Yeah,
that hard to find, you know,
exactly.
the hard to grow area? You want something that's going to take hold and you don't have to worry about it.
Right. And again, I remember in the very first book on Texas native plants that really hit the thing by Sally and Andy Wasowski, they have a picture of this red form mowed.
Oh,
as a large-scale ground cover, and it was absolutely glorious because you know, all the flowers will come up at once when it's mowed and cut at the same time.
That would be wonderful.
The show was really spectacular. So,
and it gets real thick then, I bet, if you mow it too.
Right. So great choices for I'd say half-day shade or sun, right?
Right, right. Or just dappled shade all day long.
Yeah.
You know,
really,
under the canopy of a high canopy of trees.
What I often tell people is if they have problems growing things in shade that don't, and they want colors, look for the large leaf varieties of salvia.
Right.
Like this.
Yes.
And I think
and there are many others.
Right, right.
Right.
Well, Sharon, we're not going to be able to get to all the plants, unfortunately, but we really do appreciate you coming by and sharing all these cool things. Especially excited about these new grass introductions. I think that's really...
those are wonderful. People are loving them, too.
I'll bet. I'll bet they are.
Lots of good feedback.
Well, Sharon Truett again from the Natural Gardener. It's always a pleasure to see you.
Well,
you do such a great job down there. Thanks for coming back.
You're welcome.
All right, and coming up next, it's our friend Skip Richter.
Hello and welcome to Down to Earth. You know, this is the time of year when we fertilize our turf grasses, and that's our question of the week this time. In fact, it's really a combination question. How do I fertilize turf, and what about combination products? Combination products are those where we put a weed control in with the fertilizer, or perhaps an insecticide in with the fertilizer to kill two birds with one stone. I don't recommend those, and here's the reason why. You very seldom need to treat your entire lawn with either a weed killer or an insecticide. A second reason is with the weed killers, the time to prevent weeds and the time to fertilize don't coincide. Warm season weeds began sprouting in late February or early March, and they've been up and growing for a while now. So by the time you put the product down, it may be too late to control them. It's also possible that the weeds you have aren't going to be controlled by the particular herbicide in that weed and feed combination mix. It's better to fertilize turf when you need to fertilize turf and deal with your weeds appropriately. You can bring a picture, a photo, or a weed to the Extension office. We can identify it and tell you how to manage it. It may mean just building a stronger lawn, or it may mean using a particular product and a spot treatment at the right time of the year. Now is the time to fertilize. In fact, the easiest way to remember when to fertilize your lawn is tax day, April 15th. About the time you've mowed the grass 2 times, that doesn't count weeds, just the grass, when it's grown enough to need a second mowing, it can really utilize the nutrients. If you fertilize really early, it ends up getting washed away. But if you wait until the second mowing, you put it down, water it in with about a ½ inch of irrigation, and the grass can take it and use it. You need about a ½ pound of nitrogen, no more than a pound of nitrogen, somewhere in that range, per 1,000 square feet. You can buy fertilizers in different ratios. We usually recommend something with a 3:1:2 or 4:1:2 ratio of nutrients. There's a lot of good information that's available for free on the Grow Green site. There's free publications around town, and we can provide you with instructions on how much fertilizer to use. But keep in mind that a gradual feeding through the year is much better than dumping a lot of fertilizer on at one time. While you may think it's going to give you a great lawn, it ends up creating a lot of green top growth, not much root growth, and then when summer drought arrives, you've got other problems on your hands. So fertilize moderately at this time of year. And as far as the weeds are concerned, most of those winter weeds that have been going to seed for a while now, just mow them and ignore them, and we'll deal with the summer weeds as they come. This week's featured plant is Tangerine Beauty Crossvine. Crossvine is a native plant here in Texas. It's really native throughout the southeastern United States as well. Tangerine Beauty is a specific variety that's absolutely stunning. This is a very vigorous vine, and you want to plant it where it's somewhat confined, on a section of fence perhaps, or something where you can kind of keep it in bounds. If you just put it at the base of a telephone pole, it'll head on up the pole and down the line. It tends to really run down a long chain link fence as well. But it is a beautiful vine that blooms very heavily in the spring and then sporadically on through the year. It's an evergreen vine, and one that we ought to be planting more of. It's a great way to cover a fence or to put it over an arbor, a pergola, or some other structure structure. Tangerine Beauty crossvines readily available and well adapted to our soils and climate. This is a time of year when we're planting all kinds of warm season plants. All those annuals and flowers that are annuals and perennial flowers that we love to use in our landscapes for color can be planted now. So can warm season vegetables. The things that fruit like beans and tomatoes and eggplant and peppers and squash can all be planted at this time of the year. It's getting a little late to get a good crop on tomatoes, but if you have an early maturing variety, you can still plant those. Corn can still go in now, as can cucumbers, and then the greens like Swiss chard or perhaps other warm season greens like Malabar spinach. Even okra can go in the ground now. It's also time to plant woody ornamentals if you haven't done so. The sooner you get them in, the better. Watch for black spot on the roses and powdery mildew on roses too. Powdery mildew also attacks crepe myrtles, and so if you haven't planted a variety that's naturally resistant, which is what we recommend, you need to be checking them and treating it when it's early. There's a lot of very safe products that you can use for that. For more information or for a way to contact the County Extension Office in your area, visit the klru.org/CTG website.
Thanks, Skip. Now let's check in with Trisha Shirey for Backyard Basics.
I get a lot of questions from new gardeners about what they did wrong. They plant things and the plants just don't succeed. And so I've come up with some things that in talking to people, that I figured out that they've done wrong. So this is basically the biggest mistakes that new gardeners make. And one of those is failing to prepare the soil well. Even if you're planting a very drought-tolerant, xeriscape type plant, you still need to prepare the soil. Loosen it, add some organic material, add a good balanced organic fertilizer. Now, if you're planting a rose or vegetables or herbs, you'll need to add even more compost and perhaps more fertilizer. So it's important to do a little research to find out what that plant's requirements are. But if you just dig a hole and stick a plant in, you're bound to not succeed with your garden. Now, the other thing that I think people fail to do is care for their new transplants. Whether you're planting a 4-inch pot or a 1-gallon or a 5-gallon plant, remember that those plants in the nursery have probably had a light sprinkling of water every day, if not a couple of times a day. So when you put them in the ground, you need to do the same thing until they have a good root system established. So regular watering. Also, many of these transplants have been in a greenhouse. They haven't been exposed to bright sun, to the wind. So just setting them outside without doing a little bit of care can really damage them early on. So gradually expose your transplants to morning sun and then a little more sun until they've been outside for a week or so in the elements before you plant them, or give them a little bit of protection once you plant them in the garden. And that's true with any of your transplants. Another thing that you want to look for are transplants that have been protected in the nurseries, especially in the early spring. Many times nurseries and garden centers get these plants in, they leave them outdoors, so when we have temperatures below 45, particularly things like tomatoes and peppers and basil, if they've been exposed to these cold temperatures, they don't die, but they just never really thrive. So your tomatoes will never set fruit. You don't ever see any production from your peppers. Your basil just doesn't grow. And it's possibly because they've been damaged by being exposed to cold temperatures. So buy from nurseries and garden centers that actually keep their plants in a greenhouse when it's cold at night and you know that they've been protected. They should look really healthy and vigorous. And then when you put them out, make sure you're protecting those tender transplants early on. Now, another thing that makes for success here in Texas is mulch, particularly in the summertime. If you have your plants mulched well, they will definitely survive. And you can mulch with shredded native landscape like this, or you can use leaves, you can use all sorts of organic materials like pine straw. Don't mulch too early, particularly with your vegetable garden. Let the plants harden off a bit, because mulch does provide hiding places for snails and slugs and pill bugs. So you want those stems of your plants to be a little bit tough, but definitely get the mulch in before the hot weather strikes, because it holds in moisture, it keeps down weeds, and it keeps the plants much healthier. And it'll protect them in the winter too, and you'll water less. Another thing you need to look for are insects in your garden. And it's important to know the good bugs from the bad bugs, what the larval stage of various insects look like, because some of the beneficials look very different in their larval stage. And have a few products on hand to take care of insect damage when that happens. So look on the Central Texas Gardener website under Trisha's Corner, and under insect control, I have a list of some of the insects and books that insecticides and books that you'll want to keep on hand to help you be successful with your new garden.
For more tips, online video, and our weekly blog, check out klru.org/CTG. Next week, get a preview of the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center Garden Tour. Until then, I'll see you in the garden. Visit klru.org/CTG to learn more about today's program, upcoming events, and to sign up for our electronic newsletter. Check out John's how-to tips and visit Trisha's Corner for ideas inside and out. Get growing at klru.org/CTG.